Digimon Ghost Game is a 2021 anime that, upon coming out, had a pretty good chunk of interest for it, but then faded away into obscurity. Digimon Adventure 2020 is a remake of the original Digimon anime that got a lot of excitement for it because of everyone's nostalgia coming into play, but then very quickly disappointed and was forgotten about. Digimon Universe Aptly Monsters is a 2016 anime that I don't think anyone took any real interest in. And Digimon Cross Wars is a 2010 anime that, yeah, I don't talk about that one. But yeah, if you couldn't take the hint, we're talking about why every Digimon series that has come out since the original batch, and also Data Squad slash Savers, has pretty much left no pop cultural impact, even while airing. And before we go any further, I know what you're going to say. You're like, oh, Digimon is a huge franchise, and it never goes away. It's always around. You're just a Pokemon lover, and it's totally there, and it's big, and everyone loves it, and it makes billions of dollars. Like, calm down. I fully acknowledge Digimon does have its spot in pop culture, and every time they do something with this franchise, it does gain some level of attention. I am mostly talking today in regards to the anime and the state of the franchise as a whole, not individual elements like, say, the card game, which is currently, I think, still doing pretty good, and the video games, in which case Survive is a really good game and y'all should give it a try. I simply want to talk about why it is that this brand never seems to get to the fame and notoriety that its hardcore fans seem to have for it. So I think we should probably start off with the most obvious factor. Part 1. It's not 1999 anymore. So, Pokemon, Digimon, Yu-Gi-Oh! This trifecta of toy commercial shonen type anime became kind of the show that people of my age sort of look to as their big encompassing franchises. And there was one very important thing about this that allowed for these brands to reach this level of notoriety, and that was the state of the internet. You see, in 1999, which, oh my god, the fact that I have to talk about that in historical context makes me feel old. You see, in 1999, the internet was around. Many kids who were my age, I was about 6, and a little bit older, had some level of access to computers, and therefore the internet, and therefore a lot of us probably did have some level of understanding of just kind of the fandom these franchises created. You see, it wasn't just that you could watch Pokemon on TV, buy the toys, eat the snacks, get the cards. You could also then go online and see the very early stages of internet fandom, talk about all these different theories and little leaks coming from Japan and all of this stuff. And all of that stuff accumulated in the start of subculture for media. And we saw this in the 80s with obviously things like He-Man and Ninja Turtles. But because you now had a very young internet, people could constantly, in ways they couldn't before, be having their fandoms in their lives and learning about different aspects of them and becoming obsessed with them. Now, many of you may be saying that, well, the internet is so much bigger now, and now it's an even bigger part of everyone's lives. So shouldn't these franchises be able to do even better? Not quite. You see, nowadays, the difference, instead of a few franchises having the online presence that then fuels kids to keep wanting more of it, now it's everything. Everything has a million fan sites and a million Facebook and Twitter posts about it constantly. You can constantly be inducted with different things. And while, yes, the older you get, the more you will settle into things you like, rather it's Demon Slayer, My Hero Academia, or Jujutsu Kaisen, for younger people who maybe aren't necessarily that dedicated or loyal, it's just information overload all the time. The hope whenever a new franchise brings out things like, say, a Ghost game or a new Yu-Gi-Oh series, the hope is that that love for it will propel it to the new fans. However, new fans can't really get so into something the way my generation could, because there's so many more things vying for their attention. There's not really the time they need to sit there to get really into a brand. So therefore, Digimon needs to kind of change its marketing. In which case, that brings us to part 2, the marketing problem. So, you know what one of the other things that things like Ghost Game and Aptly Monsters and Cross Wars had in common? Not a huge marketing push. Adventure 2020 had a little bit more of life breathed into it, but I think that was also because they had to sell the card game along with it. But for the most part, when Digimon animes come out, there's not a lot of fanfare, there's not a lot of attention. They just sort of seem to show up, go, and then just kind of leave without ever really doing a lot for them. Going back to those 90s animes, one of the other big factors was their marketing pushes. The Pokemon marketing fan base is at this point a very well known thing. You could not throw a rock without hitting a kid who was dressed as Pikachu and then having that parent threaten to sue you because 90s. And Digimon did follow suit and try a similar thing. Obviously, it didn't get as big because, well, nothing was going to get as big as Pokemon. Digimon did try pretty hard. There was a ton of toys and clothing. I remember I had a Gabumon doorstop and a Tokomon piggy bank, which I think I still have somewhere. These things also did what I was saying with the internet, and that's put it in the world around you. And when I don't see these newer shows doing that same level of push, and you can make the argument, well, we're in the States where they're not really pushing Digimon. Well, you could say that's also a big thing, not trying to go after bigger marketing markets besides Japan. But even when I look at, say, Japanese marketing or see pictures from press events, there isn't really what there needs to be. You take Pokemon, for instance, and granted, again, Pokemon's a very different creature, but with their new anime, they made sure to do a ton of marketing to let you know Ash was gone and this new girl is in. And even like the Yu-Gi-Ohs, we don't see it as much here, but each new Yu-Gi-Oh, they do a pretty good job of in Japan of letting people know there's a change. None of these Digimon shows had nearly the big push they need for people to take interest, so it doesn't matter if you like Ghost games more kind of darker tone. It doesn't matter because you probably didn't know about it unless you heard it from someone else, and, well, yeah, you can't watch what you don't know exists. But of course, now we must get on to the true meat and potatoes of this discussion, and that is part 3, the shows themselves. So, I am fully aware that every Digimon series has its fandom, all of whom will say that theirs is the best. But I think for the most part, when you really look at the consensus, the general idea is that the first 3 seasons are considered the best. Season 4, Frontier, is kind of there. Data Squad is an underrated gem, which it is. And the newer ones, just kind of take your pick of which one you can tolerate the most. Cross Wars immediately turned a lot of people off for having less interesting characters and not a particularly great story. Appley Monsters, like I said, didn't seem to gain a lot of interest in all, though honestly of modern Digimon, that's probably the one I kind of enjoyed the most. Adventure 2020 is a train wreck. I did a couple of videos on it. Everyone knows it sucks. And Digimon Ghost Game started out really strong and had a lot of good interest in it, but then settled into this Monster of the Week format that, to my understanding, I gave up on it. It didn't really do anything with until probably the end. And here you sort of see the problem, and that is each of these shows never really tries to sort of emulate the things that made the original Digimon special. The reason the first few Digimon seasons stick in people's minds so much when compared to things like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! Is because it's a lot more serious than Pokemon, but a lot more relatable than Yu-Gi-Oh! You see, for the most part, the Digimon seasons were just about kids who got thrown into Lost in the Woods scenarios just with monsters. And because of this, they were allowed to then write them to just be kids. A lot of people I know, myself included, say that Digimon was the first time they were exposed to themes of like divorce or adoption and not really knowing if you belong, or inadequacy, or maybe being like spoiled but kind of knowing it and wanting to do something about it. For a lot of kids, these were way more relatable characters and they felt way more realistic. When you watch those older Digimon seasons, do they hold up? Not entirely. There's a lot of dated aspects. I could do without the whole 9-year-old girl basically offers to be a John for a guy. I could do without that. But for the most part, I think the way they present the kids and the themes around each of them feels very relatable and realistic for actual kids who probably could use characters they can relate to in their lives. But when you move on to, say, the modern Digimon seasons, you have Cross Wars, where the main character is just Mr. Perfect. You have Aptly Monsters, which gets a little bit closer, but still sort of treats the kids as being very goofy and silly. Uh, Adventure never even bothers to make the characters feel the way they're supposed to, and Ghost Game had the same problem as Aptly Monsters. There's no attempt to make the characters feel like they used to. And I'm not trying to sound like just someone after nostalgia, but I do feel like this ability to talk to kids in a way that was respectable was what made Digimon Digimon for a lot of people more than the action or the designs or the plot. It was that feeling, and to see it never replicated again, I think is really what keeps people from really getting invested. On top of that, the serious tone is gone. These shows have their levity and their goofy moments, but for the most part, seasons 1 through 5 take themselves pretty seriously. Again, this is what kids kind of want. They want a show that's going to respect their intelligence and treat them just a little bit older than they actually are, and you just don't get that anymore. Ghost Game comes the closest with a lot of episodes that feel genuinely scary and have some kind of fucked up stuff in them for kids, but there's no stakes. The solution is always presented by the end of the episode. No one ever really gets hurt, and everything is fine. There's no consequences. There's no ongoing narrative. There's no increasing of stakes as the story goes by. Also, side note, I kind of feel like Ghost Game was never meant to be a Digimon show. I think it was just supposed to be like a kids monster of the week sort of anime, and then someone said, let's put Digimon in there because we need to keep the franchise going. But yeah, all in all, these have been my thoughts as to why I think Digimon has never really reached the heights I think people want it to, or that even what we felt like it did when it first came out. But what do you think? In the comment section below, give me your thoughts on this. What's your favorite Digimon season? I'm sure a lot of people will have very lengthy reasons. And as always, click to like, click to subscribe, and join me in the future as we see if more anime franchises can reach the heights we all wish they could.